feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review from Sundance 23. I am one of your hosts. That's the only time I've done that intro that way. Matt Rohrbeck alongside. He's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved. Eric Marchin.
Matt, we're on the last interview review of the day. See, we're both a little bit loopy at this point, but I think it actually fits nicely into the tone and the headspace of this kind of whimsical melancholy that we're going to be talking about. And also, I mean, this is a movie that sets the record straight that cream cheese, that cottage cheese is a curd.
I've been eating a lot of cottage cheese over the last couple weeks, Eric.
You've been
And
curding it up there, buddy?
You know way too much about it. Today we are reviewing Rachel Lambert's Sometimes I Think About Dying, starring Daisy Ridley and Dave Merheige. Right? I think I got that right. Shout out to Dave. He's from Canada. This is the thing. When we do these reviews, I look up people's names. I try to pronounce them right, and I still get them wrong. So I apologize, Dave. Merheige. It's a great last name. Eric, how are you?
Matt, I'm good. I'm feeling better than Dave Merheige right now. So
why? Dave's great in this movie.
No.
He's
I
good.
just
He's
mean in terms
Canadian.
of if he's listening to us right
listening
now,
to me try to say his name. I'm sorry. Okay,
Dave, you're great in the film. You're awesome.
He's great. He's really great. Eric, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. I'm good. I think we've gotten to that point.
I got it.
We're in a bit of a Merheige right now, a bit of a hazy Merheige. We're at this point where we're at the end of the festival.
I got it wrong. It's Merheige.
It's Merheige. Dave, we are so sorry. We are idiots. Clearly, but we both loved your performance and the film. It's always just interesting where we get to this moment and we are 4 or 5 reviews in, and you're trying to kind of keep everything in sync, but at the same time your brain is not on that kind of level of getting through just a simple review. So
maybe you're daydreaming, maybe you're just that was in relation to the movie. But I think it's a good little movie, dude. Like, again, I think here's a quick synopsis for everyone. So Sometimes I Think About Dying. Fran, Daisy Ridley, is a socially awkward office worker who spends most of her time in isolation and daydreams of her own death when a new colleague pricks the bubble of her isolation. I like that little description. That's actually pretty accurate compared to some of the other descriptions we've read. I think this is a wonderful little movie. This was early on in the fest for both of us. I think after a couple movies I wasn't so hot on. This was, I think it's wonderfully stylistic. I think that trope of a character kind of imagining things or daydreaming or dreaming about something is a little bit overdone. I've seen that even in this Sundance way too many times. But I think in this movie it kind of really fits the depressed and kind of mundane state of mind that Fran is going through, and I think it has a wonderful little performances from Daisy Ridley and Dave Merheige. And I just found myself really kind of like cheering for Fran, like much like if she was in Star Wars, Daisy Ridley, like with Rey, of just wanting her to succeed in life and wanting her to get out of this funk and get out of her depression. And like every little step that she takes to kind of come out of her shell and do something different and try to make friends and try to, go on dates with Robert and things like that. Like I found myself literally kind of cheering at my screen like it was a superhero movie or a Star Wars movie. And like I just felt like it perfectly captured that kind of office life, especially in a small town, of that kind of repetitive kind of depressing nature of it all, where your life's not really going anywhere and you're just doing the same thing every day. You don't have many friends, you just go home and you just don't really do anything. And like I think that's a very relatable thing to many people, and I feel like Daisy Ridley captures that so wonderfully with Fran. And then as you see this kind of relationship blossom, whether it's platonic or romantic, and her come out of her shell, like I mentioned, is just I think really, really wonderful. And I think the movie has a great style to it too. I love the cinematography of how this small town on outskirts of Seattle, right? Like
Oregon,
just
Oregon.
outside Oregon. Okay. Portland? Outside. I thought they mentioned Seattle at one point. Isn't
Well, Seattle's
Robert
mentioned
from
because Robert originally comes from
Robert is from
Seattle,
Seattle?
but
That's why I
he
thought it was near Seattle,
but he
but I
also
guess it's
went to
Oregon is
Montreal's
also.
McGill University,
Yeah,
which gets a
yeah.
mention. So that's kind of
That's
cool
probably
as
that
well.
Canadian connection, right?
Yeah.
And I just love the cinematography of this small little like port town, like this like not seaside, but like,
Well, it is. It is kind of like a
it is, I guess,
sleepy
like
seaside
yeah,
kind of community, and it
yeah,
adds to the sort of the whimsy of it, the fantasy elements of it, because it does feel like, like the fog coming in the morning some
yeah,
days, and the quality of going to work, but the architecture and the roads kind of also reminding you a little bit of like San Francisco, where like
yeah.
everything is kind of
The
almost on
houses
a
and
hill, and the older architecture. Like there's a lot of character within the architecture and the location itself, and that kind of adds to the whimsy, but also like the fantasy elements of it. You also have these great little kind of interactions with other colleagues at Fran's place of work, and I think like just being a fly on the wall and listening to everybody talk about sort of maybe either mundane things, or have kind of little comedic anecdotes about life, or just how they're kind of going about their day. It almost has like a radio kind of play, kind of like a stage play
yeah,
version, where you could close your eyes and just listen to the
focus on one
conversations.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, again, like Fran is also a little bit of a conduit to that world, where it's like, she's kind of invisible at first, kind of almost disappearing into the production design, or just in the prison like cubicle that she's in, and kind of avoiding any kind of interaction or social kind of acceptance in any way or form. And then when Robert comes in, she's slowly kind of coming out of her bubble a little bit. But it's interesting, even when she has these kind of fantasies, not morbid fantasies per se, but almost like maybe there's some sort of um peace and catharsis in thinking about your death in a way that's almost weirdly therapeutical.
Just
And
wanting to feel something, right? Yeah,
yeah.
that's kind of it, right? Like, and I feel like that was what's so relatable. And I've worked in offices before, and I've been this, as in, we're two guys who have a podcast, and you can call us attention seekers or extroverts for that. But I feel like I'm very much an introvert. I think you are as well, where I think we've been that person in a social setting where you want to be that extrovert, and you want to kind of be part of it. At least you, in your mind, you think you want to be part of it, but when you're in that situation, you're standing off to the side, or you don't know how to talk to people, or small talk makes you cringe, right? Like, you might be listening to those small conversations around the office, but you're like, that sounds like a goddamn nightmare, and I don't want any part of it, right? But you see these other people that it's just their personality, and they're able to have those and take interest in people and things like that, and it really kind of hinders you when you're such an introvert, and you're depressed, right? Like, and I felt like it was a really, understanding, portrait of a depressed person. Like, I never felt like, you said like these daydreams about dying. I mentioned this, that we mentioned to my sister that this was a great movie, and she's like, man, that title is really, like awful, not in awful of like, just like, sometimes I think about dying as it sounds like you're thinking about killing yourself,
It's a
right? And I don't
provocative
necessarily.
statement about
Yeah,
depression, and it kind of even has almost a weirdly aggressive kind of state. I mean, Killers does too, which is the stage play it's based
yeah,
on. So it kind of like either one of those is kind of like
sure,
descriptive in a way that kind of feels like, oh, is this like either an action movie, or like a thriller, or some sort of depressive meditation on life, that
yeah,
is a very much a film festival kind of movie. And it is a film festival movie in a lot of ways, but
oh
it's
yeah,
kind of working on the, like, it kind of avoids the stereotypes, I think, of what you would expect this kind of movie to be. It embraces certain aspects of the melancholy, of the mystery, of the heightened reality, but then also kind of, again, it grounds the material in a world where we can understand how this person is feeling, and how the performance is so in tune with the character and the environment that she's in. And it's not necessarily like, oh, a great actor is dressing down in order to kind of better, you know, involve herself in the environment that she's in. Like it feels genuine to the performance that Daisy Ridley's giving, but also to the other people she's interacting with. Like even like the way that the movie begins with, you know, the last day of a colleague, Caroline and
Carol.
Carol,
Yep.
and where that goes. Like that is such a
There's such a great
beautifully,
monologue like later in the movie that is so good. Like
yeah.
she delivers like that actress Marcia DeBonis. I don't know why I said it like that. That's probably not how you say it, but
Is
she
it
is
Debois?
so no, it's Debonis and the B is capitalized. So Deboni, Debonis. Anyways, Carol, the character Carol Marcia, wonderful, just great. Like she felt so naturalistic, dude, and that's kind of what the vibe. Like everyone felt natural in their roles. Like, there's some movies, this Sundance especially. I kept saying to Nevis, being like, they're just so written. Like I can just see through the seams where I'm like, people aren't talking like you would in real life. And that can work in some films, right? With a, stylized nature and things like that. But when you need to ground it in reality, like, and this movie has some fantasy elements, like Eric mentioned, but like all the characters feel natural. And that's what I really loved. And yeah, Carol's whole arc and how what Fran learns from Carol, someone that she probably didn't interact with much at the office, but Carol was always kind to her and nice to her, and it kind of gives you a different perspective on life and your office and where you work and things like that, right? You might view it one way, but someone views it a completely different way, or you don't understand what you have until it's gone, kind of thing. And then which goes in multiple facets in Carol's beautiful monologue that she has, or beautiful scene she has near the last act of the movie. But yeah, she's wonderful, dude. She's so good.
Yeah, and even just to enjoy, you know, life in the moment, not in a
Yeah,
kind of uplifting way that it's like, you know, take advantage of every day, but to really understand that maybe what you're building towards, whether it be retirement and, you know,
yeah.
pleasure cruises and things like that, it it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get there. And the moments that you
Or it's
have
going to make you happy or anything like
beforehand, you
that
have to
too.
make sure that you
Little
take
moments
advantage
too.
of those little things in life. And you know, like it has a great opening title credit sequence
Oh my
that's
god, beautiful.
phenomenal. Brie Elrod from Red Rocket has a small role as a diner as a waiter that
Oh
comes
yeah,
and kind of helps out. But yeah, there's just these little touches that feel genuine. And I think, like, again, you know, a lot of these movies, this movie could have gone in that direction of being, you know, insincere and disingenuous with how it's portraying the culture and the world that it's inhabiting, but it's also really really funny at times. Like there are moments where there are certain cuts or there are certain lines of dialogue. Like there's a great bit about, and it's just a second, where Robert, you know, is wanting to make pasta, and he's just moved into this new
yeah,
place, and it's like,
yeah.
you think I can make pasta in this pan, basically, like
Yeah,
not
the
even
deadpan
a
delivery
pot.
is really great. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is really good. Like, and that's what I mean. It feels natural, but still very funny, right? Like, it doesn't feel like a punchline. And his love of movies, like Robert's love of movies, we just discussed shortcomings where I said, like, it doesn't feel like how people who love movies really talk. Like, I think they do a really good job with Robert and his love of movies, of someone who understands that certain movies aren't going to be for everyone, but I really love these movies, and this is, he has posters littered around his house and DVDs and stuff like that. And um I just thought they did a good job with his background of being a movie lover, that I felt was also very believable. And yeah, you mentioned the style of the movie. Like, we mentioned the cinematography by Dustin Lane, but like I love how they shoot that little seaside town. It's got that, again, sucker for a grainy look with a interesting aspect ratio, and flamboyant but still really stylized title sequence that I feel like fits that kind of fantasy element that they bring in with her visions, or not her visions, her daydreams and things like that. So like, the overall style of the movie is really great, and then it's just surrounded by this wonderful Daisy Ridley performance that it feels very naturalistic. And yeah, the editing, the way that it cuts is like perfect punchlines, but also feels very believable and natural. And I feel like, yeah, I thought this was wonderful for someone who, suffers from, I wouldn't say like maybe as much as Fran is in this movie. I just found myself like relating to it a lot, um really cheering for the character. Like they do such a good job of getting, you wanting her to succeed, I think, and really caring and giving a shit about Fran throughout. So every little, just these little victories she would have, like felt like, climbing up Mount Everest. And it's hard to explain, but if you know people who have suffered with depression and stuff like that, or you suffer from whatever you're dealing with, it's just like,
And loneliness, I think, as
and
well.
loneliness, yeah, like those little victories of just going out with friends or making a new friend or going on a date or something like that, like they're these huge things. Like they're, make a mountain out of a molehill, but like sometimes it is a mountain even though it's a molehill for some people. Like um it's that's what I found. I was like, man, this movie's doing such a good job for every little thing. I'm like, fuck yeah, Fran. Yeah, go on that date. I'm like, fuck yeah, Fran, participate in the murder mystery and like do a good job with it. And like each little thing, I was like so on her side. So you see her character grow throughout this whole thing. And she still is struggling with everything by the end. But like, I feel like her growth throughout this was just such a wonderful thing to watch. And it's paced so well. Again, 91 minutes. What they can do in 91 minutes, I think, is great too.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at some of the notes I took, like just there's little things that even with some of her coworkers, again, like that one meeting where they're bringing Robert in for the first time, and
Oh
they're
my God.
they're introducing everybody.
Yeah.
The one guy I love the most was Rich, when like it's like there's a picture of you like fishing. It's like, I don't fish. And so my line is my one sort of like jot note is, Rich don't fish. But like even with Fran, it's like, I'm Fran and I like cottage cheese, and like that's the whole thing where they're like talking. It's a good way to get out exposition in such a short amount
Learn
of
about each
time
character very quickly.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and get a little bit of info on them, and just like kind of like that office kind of world building in a way, and like just those little things I think are really lovely as well. And then even sort of like the play between them with the emails that they're sending back and forth has this really kind of, not cutesy, but there's something really
Oh, on
charming about
Slack?
it.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
they also email, but they also Slack message once
Yeah, and I
back
like
and
that
forth.
as
Yeah.
well, where like they're talking back and forth about, like, that's where you learn about, I keep wanting to say cream cheese because I'm more of a cream cheese guy than I am a cottage cheese
Cottage
person.
cheese.
But like her talking about cottage cheese, and cottage cheese is weirdly reflective of like the kind of like plainness that maybe the character feels like invisible and kind
Yeah.
of can be put on anything, but necessarily doesn't feel like she's contributing anything that's really special. But there is something about her that is still very much
Appealing.
of
Yeah.
value, and again, like it's not changing her world in a way that's going to like reinvent her as a person. But I feel like even like the little things that maybe we're not as familiar with, like even when Daisy Ridley's character's talking about how she grew up in the quiet place or the quiet
Yeah.
zone, and like
Of the
how
town. There
of the
was like a
town.
quiet side. Yeah. That
Yeah,
she,
and how some of the characters are like, oh, that must have been really terrible for you, and she's like, no, I really loved it. And it kind of gives you some insight to, again, how the character is kind of very, you know reserved in a lot of ways. And like watching this movie, you're just kind of frustrated that, post Star Wars, Daisy Ridley has had not a struggle, but like the studio system, or the film industry hasn't been able to give her other roles like this. And it's like she's kind of languished in more like, let's get her in another tent pole, or let's get her in another sci-fi movie, and let's like kind of not give her something like this that is so nuanced and subtle, but also there's something beautifully calibrated to having a character open themselves up over the course of a story. And yeah, like it's so weird because she's so good in those Star Wars films, but I also feel like, again, like she has so much potential,
yeah.
as an actor, that when you're watching this, it's like, man, they really need to give her more roles that are not like traditional, like, let's put you in the movie star role. Let's give her more stuff like this to do, and let's let her find a voice outside of that. And like, I mean, it's such a shame that like that it's taken this long to get to that point.
Yeah, like maybe not the Kristen Stewart route, right? But something like that, like
Or
more
Keira Knightley. I mean, like
Keira
Keira
Knightley,
Knightley and
sure.
Daisy Ridley
But I
kind of
just mean
almost have the
someone who was in
same.
a big tentpole kind of thing that goes
Well,
to do more interesting
well,
kind of stuff.
Pirates
I
of the
guess Keira
Caribbean,
yeah.
right? Like you
You're
think
right,
like
you're right, you're right.
that after that, like she kind of came into her own with Joe Wright's Pride and Prejudice, but there was a moment there where it's like you become, you know, a commodity in Hollywood, where it's like you're a discovery in this film, and let's put you in everything and see if it sticks. Like we've talked about this before, but Colin
But I don't
Farrell
even
was
think
kind
that
of
really
like that.
happened with her, right? Like she did
Well,
pop up in, you know, Murder on the Orient Express and
there was that, and then you know
Chaos Walking.
that was the other big one, right? Where it's like let's put her in another kind of sci-fi adjacent franchise movie that will
I've
potentially.
blocked that movie from my mind. I
I think
forgot I
most
even
people
saw it.
have. I think probably even Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley have at this point,
And
because
Doug
that was a
Liman.
movie that went through tons of reshoots, that went through um it became a nightmare for the people that were working on it. And I think actually Charlie Kaufman did a rewrite on one of the
That was
drafts.
2021. I can't
Yeah,
even.
but it was delayed
can't
for so
even.
long as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, like it's just really fascinating where like you have somebody who is in one of the biggest franchises ever, and for the most part was really acclaimed in you know the Star Wars movies that she was in, specifically I think both Force Awakens and Last Jedi, and then kind of afterwards struggled to find work and kind of, you know, keep that momentum going. And this movie is like, okay, like she is so good, guys, let's keep finding roles that are offbeat, or maybe not just putting her in the hero roles, or not putting her in roles that, you know, we expect actors to kind of continue to play on. You know, let's not always have to think like, oh, Daisy, when is Daisy Ridley going to be in a Marvel movie, or when is Daisy Ridley going to be in the next blockbuster thing, like, you know.
Which I'm sure could also happen, but I mean, it's just, yeah, give her a shot with some smaller stuff because she's excellent in this. I'm gonna give the movie a 4 to 5. I really, really liked it quite a bit. It's one of my kind of top 4 Sundance movies. There was like a handful of movies that I really, really liked. I tweeted them out. It's this, Theater Camp, Eileen. What else am I missing?
You Hurt My Feelings.
You Hurt My Feelings. Those 4 are quite good. I don't think this. Sorry, Eric, you go ahead with your final thoughts, and then I'll talk about the.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, overall as a wrap up, Daisy Ridley's reserved performance and Sometimes I Think About Dying personifies a state of seclusion that's deeply felt. And when watching this, you honestly are, as you mentioned, Matt, you are always on the character's side. You're excited to see her integrate herself more into social settings as the story progresses. And you know, the romance that does blossom between Fran and Robert doesn't feel contrived or forced in that kind of like, oh, this character comes in and saves her in any way. Like it's
Yeah.
so kind of like he has problems too that we didn't even get into.
Yeah.
And like in terms of him trying to figure out love and romance and relationships, but he's also kind of a guy that feels very sincere, but he can also be a go-getter. And so like there's a lot there to like. And again, the humor I think is really funny in just the editing. You know, like there's a
Yeah.
moment that
Agreed.
involves just like having this kind of dark but kind of beautiful shot, and then it kind of being interrupted by someone, you know, in a copy room machine. Like that stuff is very, very funny. So yeah.
No, it's very, very good. Doesn't have distribution yet, right?
No,
Correct?
not yet.
Yeah,
But I'm sure it
so
will get picked up by someone, even if it's like
yeah.
IFC Films, or you know a smaller company, maybe even like, you know, Neon or someone like that will pick it up. But it probably still will be a hard sell, because it is such a little movie that is not playing on the kind of, it's not a showy movie in any way. It's not um an overly dramatic film. It's not spoon feeding you. It is a hard sell, so I wouldn't be surprised if it is a smaller
You think
distributor.
someone on Daisy Ridley alone, right, being in one of the biggest franchises, that they would take a shot on it, and I hope so because it's great. So I hope people are able to see it. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll let you guys know on our main show, Untitled Movie Podcast, if any of these Sundance films that we reviewed get picked up as an update. We have a new episode of that over on that channel and on YouTube, where we talk about the Oscar nominees as well as the Critics' Choice winners. This past Sunday was episode 3 of HBO's The Last of Us, and Eric and I happened to have an HBO Last of Us after show podcast called The Cast of Us, where we
You don't
talked
say.
about episode 3 long time. For a long time. It was a 2-hour after show. So go please check that out. We'll have another episode the next Sunday, 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a new episode every Sunday after The Last of Us. So go check out that on podcast services and on YouTube, as well as all of our other Sundance reviews and all of our other reviews right here on Untitled Movie Reviews. One-stop shop for everything is Untitled_movies over on Letterboxd. And as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Cottage cheese for the world, please.